Hello everyone, this is a follow-on video from last night's Summer Love and Life Support group call, which unfortunately was truncated by a power cut in my street that brought the Wi-Fi down and Zoom down, and I wasn't able to continue to host the call in the way that I wanted. We continued with the call, but I switched the recording off and everyone shared with each other because I couldn't be heard very well, even on my phone. So you will have seen, hopefully, the recording of the first part of the call. And this is to recap and to add some of the questions and some reflections that I didn't speak about on the call. So I'm just going to start at the beginning and go through it briefly. I started with the foundations, the things we've been talking about over the last few weeks: self-care, self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, healthy boundaries. And you might be tired of me saying this, but when it comes to showing up authentically in all our relationships, when it comes to taking those courageous steps and being honest and real, it is essential to be resourced, to feel resourced, to feel grounded, to feel rooted, to feel supported on the inside, to feel connected to ourselves, and to feel tapped into our courage. So being grounded and rooted and doing all your self-love and self-care and all those practices, they have to be in place. Those foundations have to be in place in order for us to show up authentically in all our relationships. Just think about that simple equation. When you're lifting a heavy weight, when you're doing something that requires you to use a lot of force, you need to feel strong. Similarly, when you are facing your fears, taking a courageous step and speaking out and speaking your truth, you need to feel strong. You need to feel courageous. So not only do you need support around you, so I'll talk about that in a moment, but you need to be resourced on the inside. So that's why I started the call with the foundations. Then we looked at the question of integrity. Am I in integrity? Am I being true to myself in my life? So, for example, are you being honest with yourself? Are you in denial about anything? Are you going against your values in any area of your life? And if so, it's absolutely okay. It's absolutely okay. Are you in a friendship that isn't true for you or isn't right for you? Are you dating someone and you know in your heart that it's not right for you? I was in that position. Are you in integrity, in alignment with yourself? Do you feel good about what you're doing, how you're being, how you're living, how you're showing up in the world? And, we can ask these questions and we don't have to take any drastic action. It's just about bringing it to the surface, becoming more aware and noticing if I am not in integrity in any area of my life. And it's a tricky question and it's a subtle question. So keep thinking about it. And if you are in the Telegram group, talk about it there. But there's more. Hopefully you've watched the recording of the start of the call where I talk about that. I then asked, why is it so hard to show up authentically? And a whole stream of answers came into the chat, most of them involving the word fear. Fear of criticism, fear of judgment, fear of anger, fear of losing something. And that's when the call went out. And what I was sharing is often we have a fear of not getting what we want or losing something that we already have. And that is why it is so important to hold things loosely. Yes, we want our hopes and dreams. And for many of you, that is to have and maintain a healthy and loving relationship. For others, it might be to have a different career or a different life in some way. We have our dreams and our visions, and it's important to have them. But we also want to hold them loosely, hands open, rather than hold them tightly like that, clenched fists, tense, stressed. Hold them loosely and feel relaxed. And if we do that, it is easier to show up authentically in our relationships. So imagine if you are dating someone and you're holding it loosely. And in that situation, you are able, I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to trust that this person will stay with me. And if they won't, I'm going to trust that I'm going to be okay. So I'm going to trust in whatever outcome, and I'm going to hold it loosely. And when I do that, I'm going to show up authentically and speak my truth. And you might have read my book where I showed up authentically in a dating relationship that I was in. I put my cards on the table. I said, this is what I want. I want commitment. I want relationship. And I wasn't even holding it loosely. I desperately wanted him to say yes. And he said no. But it was the best thing that could ever happen to me, of course. But it hurt, like it really hurt. But I guess I was holding it loosely enough to be able to speak my truth and say what I wanted. On the other hand, if we're holding on tightly and this has to be the guy for me, or this has to be the woman for me, or the person for me, or I desperately want this job, I have to get this job, then we're going to try and manipulate. We're not going to show up honestly. We're not going to be real. We are going to maybe hide some of our truth or stand for things that we wouldn't normally stand for. So I hope you see that difference. So are you holding on tightly or holding on loosely? And the more you hold on loosely, the more you will show up authentically. And one of the keys to holding things loosely, for me, is some form of spirituality or faith or trust or, belief in the universe or God or higher power or nature, or that I will be okay, that I will be held, that there's something there, that something is holding me. And you could see that as this group or your group of friends, but I think some form of spiritual connection is really important when we're trying to hold things loosely. I'm going to pause and take a look at my notes. So we have this fear of losing something that we already have: connection, love, affection, validation, sense of safety, perhaps, because our inauthenticity means that the other person isn't being angry with us, or we have a fear of not getting what we want. And the question to ask is, at what cost? So my inauthenticity, if I am being authentic, what is the cost of that? And for me, there's an inner cost and there's an outer cost. So if I am showing up inauthentically in my relationships or in my life, I feel really icky. I feel uncomfortable. I feel some anger and resentment towards myself because I'm not showing up authentically, and I will act out that anger or resentment unless I'm able to process it healthily. So I will act it out through overeating, overworking, lashing out at people, harming myself. So the first cost is the inner cost. What is the inner cost of not being authentic? Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel yuck? Do you feel angry with yourself? And what are you doing with that anger? Are you turning it inwards? And then there's the outer cost. So a relationship built on inauthenticity is a false relationship that will eventually come crumbling down. And in my experience, I will get hurt and the other person will get hurt. So what is the cost of being inauthentic in my relationships? So at what cost, and is it worth it? Is it worth me holding on to this thing that I think I've got? Is it worth it? So think about those questions. What's the cost to you? What's the cost to others of showing up inauthentically? What's the cost to your life and to your dreams and your goals? Yeah, and how does this not serve you? And how does it not serve others? Then I asked, how can we show up more authentically? What do we need to show up more authentically? How can we support ourselves to be more honest and to be more real? And here are some ideas. Firstly, we need real self-awareness. So we need awareness of our fears. So we need awareness of the reasons why we don't show up authentically. We really need to get honest with ourselves about that. Often that involves exploring our childhoods, our childhood wounds, where those fears took root, where those core beliefs took root. For example, if I am myself, I will be rejected. If I am myself, I won't be loved. If I am myself, I will be abandoned, or I will be hurt or judged or criticized. So we need to look at those core beliefs, see where they took hold, and try and challenge them. And we challenge them in many ways. We challenge them by self-soothing and self-parenting. So if you imagine that it was the little child, often in many cases, it was a smaller, younger version of ourselves who got hurt or who got abandoned or who got rejected for being authentic or felt scared about being authentic. So we want to talk to that part of ourselves. So we want to take the adult role and we want to speak kindly and softly and with compassion to the child inside. And we want to say, you know, I hear you. I know it was really hard for you to show up authentically when you were young. It didn't feel safe. The people around you didn't accept the authentic you. You were rejected, and that was so painful. And I really understand why you're afraid to be real, to be true, to be authentic. I really understand that. But I am here for you now. I am your adult. You are no longer a vulnerable child. I am here. I'm going to reparent you. And I am here to reassure you that you are safe, that it's okay to be you. It's okay to be authentic. It's okay to be real and to be true. Now, I know there's a question that came up in the call about what if we're too authentic, or what if we tend to speak our truth too much and it doesn't go down well. And I am going to come on to that. But just to begin with, I want you to think about this reparenting of ourselves. So how do we reparent ourselves and soothe ourselves? We also need in place the foundations of self-love, etc., in order to feel resourced and to feel strong, because this requires courage. And we need lots of cheerleaders around us. So if I need to have a difficult conversation with someone, if I need to be real with someone and I'm scared, I will go through the process. I will check that I am resourced. Do I feel like grounded and rooted? I will check that I understand the fears that are driving me and I know where they're coming from. I will soothe myself. I will reparent myself with those kind words. I will then reach out to other human beings for support. So I will look through my support network and I will pick up the phone, or I will pop in a message in a group and I will say, I need help. I need to have a conversation. I'm scared, and I will bookend it, which means telling someone about it before I do it, doing it, and then telling somebody about how it went afterwards. So it's held, I'm contained, and that gives me courage and it gives me strength. So we need lots of support. And we also need to be continually giving to ourselves the things that we are hoping to get, or the things that we are getting from those other people around whom we don't want to be authentic. So if I don't want to be authentic because I'm trying to get affirmation and validation from that person, I need to give myself affirmation and validation. Give it to myself, get it from some other healthy sources, perhaps. And then I won't be so desperate to get it from that person. And I will be more able to be real and authentic with that person. I hope that makes sense. So we need to keep giving to ourselves, or getting from healthy places, supporters, coaches, psychotherapists, the support group. We need to keep getting the things that we are trying to get from our boss, or from our boyfriend, or from our girlfriend. We need to try and give those things to ourselves. So validation, affirmation, love, support, connection, all in healthy ways, however you can give those to yourselves or get those from healthy sources. And we need to reassure ourselves that we are safe. So I'll just pause and have a look at my notes. Okay, so I hope all that is helpful and helps to clarify some of the questions that I posed during the call, and helps to clarify this topic. And there was a question as well about, showing up too authentically. Well, firstly, we want to discern. We always want to discern whether it is in my best interests to show up authentically in this situation. So just because we have found the courage to have a voice, and we know that we are capable of having a voice, that doesn't mean to say we need to run around all situations and have this voice. We might want to think, is it in my best interests here to speak my truth? Is this in my best interests? What is my motivation and my intention here? So you want to discern the situations where you can be authentic and it's in your best interest to do so. If you find yourself in lots of situations where it is impossible to be authentic, or it's not in your best interests, you might want to think about whether you want to start shifting some of those situations or relationships. For example, someone shared on the call that, for 10 years they were in a management position in a job where they could not show up authentically because it was used against them. So if you are in that situation, I'm not saying you quit your job and you leave immediately, but you might want to start thinking that if I can't show up authentically here, is this a good place for me? And as that person did, you might want to consider gradually, with time and with support, shifting what you're doing, changing what you're doing. If you are in a relationship where it's not in your best interests to show up authentically and speak your truth, you might want to think, is this relationship or is this friendship actually good for me? So, friends come in lots of different shapes and sizes. I have friends I like to go out dancing with and swimming with and do sport with, and friends I like to have deep conversations with. And not all friends are able to hear me on that deep level. So I either accept that some of my relationships, friendships are on this level, and I accept that, and that's okay. Or I think, actually, they don't really work for me, and I want to focus my energies on the real, authentic relationships. So if you also find that you, as was asked on the call, people who show up authentically, too authentically, perhaps at work, you feel triggered and it comes out and it's not received well, or it comes out as anger. This is about firstly trying to understand our reactions. So you'll have heard me speak about triggers. So if I find myself consistently sort of speaking out and it doesn't go well, I'm triggered and it comes out too strong, I need to ask myself, is my past invading my present? So what does this situation remind me of? Do I feel dismissed? Do I feel neglected? Do I feel abused? Do I feel mistreated? Do I feel undervalued? And what button is that pressing from my past? Gosh, this reminds me of my dad, or this reminds me of my mum, or this reminds me of my childhood in some way. And that's a painful button, and the wound is being all stirred up, and that hurts. And unless we are able to step back in the moment and remove ourselves from the situation and do some processing, we might lash out. And that isn't always in our best interests. So I did hear the person who asked this question share in the Telegram group that they were learning, doing more meditation and feeling more grounded and more rooted. And that's what we want to be doing, so that when we are triggered, in those moments of when we're triggered, that we don't necessarily react, that we take a moment, that we either remove ourselves from the situation, go to the toilet, have a cup of tea, and then think about how we want to respond, or we take a few breaths if that's all we can do, or we say, I'm going to get back to you in a moment. I need to think about this. Or we try and buy ourselves a little bit of time to breathe, to understand if I am triggered. Am I triggered? What's the trigger? What does this remind me of? And then how am I going to respond as opposed to react? How am I going to respond? And respond, to me, suggests that I have agency, that I have some sort of hold on my emotions, that I have a choice. Whereas react, for me, comes from a place, okay, I don't have a choice. I'm triggered. I'm just going to say something. So that might be of help. And again, I would also consider, well, we continue to work on the origins of our triggers. We continue to heal those wounds. And I guess we see that trigger as a really useful piece of information of the things we want to keep trying to heal. And the question also arises about, is this environment good for me? Is it a toxic environment? Are we being re-traumatized continually? Have we somehow subconsciously found ourselves or subconsciously chosen that environment because it is re-traumatizing, it is re-triggering? Maybe it's there to teach us something, or maybe it's there to show us that this environment isn't right for us, that we need a different environment. And I absolutely appreciate that for many of us, it isn't about going, right, I'm quitting, I'm leaving, but it is about thinking about, this environment isn't right for me. And, when I understood that the 24/7 news environment was no longer good for me, for the part of me that had grown and developed and was easily triggered. And when I understood that environment wasn't good for me, I didn't just leave. For a start, I was signed off work with stress and depression and everything else. But then I went back, and it took about 6 months, I think, of me just putting it out there to the world and the universe. I can't show up authentically in this environment. This environment isn't good for me. And then something came through that allowed me to have a big shift. And I appreciate, I was very fortunate, but I think I set it in motion. I put it out there. I need to get out of here. It's not good for me. I can't show up authentically. I'm going to leave this here because I could go on. I would love you to continue this conversation in the Telegram group. I will look at adding a short call for us to go over this and other things. So I'll be in touch about that. And if you're not in the Telegram group and you have any questions, you can pop me a quick email and I'll get to that as soon as I can. And yeah, thanks everyone. And thanks for bearing with me on the call. And thanks for bearing with me with the absence of a complete recording. Take care. Bye.